It's time for PaleoRadio, only on Secular Media Network.
You are now entering PaleoRadio.
Welcome to PaleoRadio with your hosts Jeremiah Bannister and Joe Elder.
Welcome to PaleoRadio, live here in studio, 95.3 FM, 1680 AM. My name is Joe Elder.
I'm the pillar of journalistic fire, Jeremiah Bannister.
And thank you guys for joining us. It's a wonderful Saturday afternoon, is it not?
It's totally awesome, man. It's beautiful outside. It's gorgeous here in Grand Rapids. And hey, we actually have kind of an empty house today. It's kind of a bummer.
Yeah, it's a little bit of an empty house, but at the same time, we can still take your guys' calls, 616-656-1680. We have a little bit of a lighter load here for our topics, but we're going to be getting more in-depth with the ones that we have. This very first one, though, the Oregon Standoff crew.
Yeah.
Doesn't get indicted in any way, and they just walk.
They walk, and the explanation from, juror number 4 is actually a really interesting thing. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about and this is a really broad topic, actually. We're covering a couple different angles on this. Not only the mainstream media being disgraced in election 2016, but also the future of journalism in a world of groups like Wikileaks, you know, and hackers, and what do journalists do? What is the future of this in a world where media is diversified?
Yeah. And the access to content is just through the roof. And cybersecurity, that whole bit, it's going to be a lot of fun, and it's going to be some serious topics. And we're also just going to talk about the election in general, and not only what mainstream media is doing with it, or even if we don't want to call it that, all of media in general, that would be including us, how we're affecting it, what's going on with that, and just the election in itself and the two candidates and what we have to deal with in the future. So a lot of good things going on, a lot of great topics.
And veterans. We might touch on some veterans. There's a whole bunch of these issues, but you know, you had a fantastic week, Joe.
I had a fun week, yeah. I was at Dr. Grin's and the Bob here in Grand Rapids. For those of you who don't know, that's one of the more prestigious comedy clubs here in Grand Rapids. It was a lot of fun. I did a set there, went very well, and had a blasty blast. So liked it a lot.
Yeah, and you know, I've got a couple things up my sleeve this week. And truth be told, I apologize to people on Facebook and social media. I have not been posting. I've been actually really busy, but it's more than that. We'll do a Facebook Live sometime. But I have two announcements, man. I've got the first one is the Center for Inquiry Michigan fundraising letter. They asked me this year to write the story of their involvement with Team Tiny Dancer and Samantha, and I wrote that. It was a difficult thing, actually, to do, but it has officially hit the mailboxes this past week, and so I can now publicize. I'm going to publish the letter on Facebook so that people can read it if they're not on the mailing list for CFI. But the other thing that I have to announce, because next week I'm not going to be here, Joe.
That's right. Yeah. JB will not be here, but you're going to be doing something really fantastic.
Really fantastic. You know, I think it was 2 weeks ago I told people I was going to do a speech at Make-A-Wish at the Amway Grand for their annual board meeting that they have, Make-A-Wish, Michigan. And Make-A-Wish reached out to me after I did the speech and said that they had an offer. And that offer turned out to be that they want me to present Samantha's Team Tiny Dancer story and her experience in London and Wales for her Make-A-Wish trip at the 2016 Wish Ball, right? So it's their biggest event. That's the Millionaire Billionaire crowd. And I've got 5 minutes to do it because they have to be really strict on their time because, what's his name's going to be there? Fantastic. Howie Mandel.
Howie Mandel. So I'm Sammy's story is kind of an opening act for Howie Mandel.
Yeah. And so that's going to happen, and that's next Saturday, so I'm not going to be here for the show.
But that's great news, though. That's just going to be great.
It's going to be massive. Tons of fun. I went out and bought a suit, Joe.
Yeah.
At the Italian Connection.
You're going to be Dapper Dan. Look at that.
Totally dapper. Did my beard, did my hair. It's going to be tons of fun.
That's great. Well, we did have a caller on the line. Please call back. Sorry it takes our introduction sometimes a little while, but call back 616-656-1680. What am I doing? In the meantime, colossal failure by prosecutors. Juror defends verdict in Oregon standoff trial. And this is by Derek Hawkins. It's a Washington Post article. Really interesting stuff. When jury deliberations began last month for the trial of Ammon Bundy and 6 others charged in the armed takeover of Oregon's Malheur National Wildlife Refuge, a guilty verdict seemed all but certain. Even defense attorneys admitted they were pessimistic. The band of gun-wielding anti-government protesters, 27 of them in total, had stormed the federal bird sanctuary in southeastern Oregon, holding it for 41 days in January and February before the last of them surrendered to authorities. The group's spokesman, Lavoy Finicum, was shot and killed by police during the occupation as he tried to drive past a roadblock and allegedly reached for a firearm.
That's an interesting thing.
That's
I
an
need
interesting
to interject,
claim. Yeah, we've
there's
seen
a video. Yeah, we've seen that. We saw how that worked, WAPO.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, a lot of people, there is a video there. It's a questionable thing if he reached for a gun.
They should have linked it. They should have linked the video.
They should have.
Yeah.
And we will. After being arrested, many of the occupiers struck plea deals, but Bundy and others chose to take their chances in court. Jurors came back with a stunning decision. After deliberating for 5 days, they had found all defendants not guilty of conspiracy to impede federal officers, the core charge in the case.
Right, and see, this is the thing, is that the case was conspiracy to impede federal officers. So you have to prove a conspiracy. And that's actually a little bit harder. That's what the jurors were saying, was that they didn't believe that there was a conspiracy behind the scenes to do this.
Yeah.
Right? And so it was an interesting thing. The key juror came forward to explain why 12 people voted to acquit him. Because it was all 12. And they said this person, juror number 4, apparently, and this is a good, there's sufficient reason for this, saying that this person did not want his or her name to be out there for possible retribution or anything like that. And I can understand that. But juror number 4, 44-year-old business student at a university, defended the across-the-board acquittals in an email exchange with the Oregonian published this week, saying prosecutors fell far short of proving the conspiracy charges. And this is an interesting thing that was said. Quote, "It should be known that all 12 jurors felt that this verdict was a statement regarding the various failures of the prosecution to prove conspiracy in the count itself, and not any form of affirmation of the defense's various beliefs, actions, or aspirations." So they're saying, listen, regardless of whether or not their ideas were bad, their beliefs were bad, or their actions or their aspirations, it was a really strict line on, is it a conspiracy?
Yeah.
And they said that they weren't compelled to convince by the
This is a case where if you are a federal officer in there and you let them hold that place for 44 days, and everyone was saying, man, if they were different people, that wouldn't have gone on for that long. If federal officers would have made their way to that encampment to try to apprehend people, I'm sure it would have been really easy to get this impeding federal officers charge. I'm only saying it in the argument of, I think even the fact that the federal government didn't act for so long actually played into the favor of these people, because they didn't actually go in there and make it a challenge. They basically apprehended them when they were moving around doing speeches about what they were doing. I mean, that's what happened.
And
much.
in the Bundys, this is the second time that the government has kind of done things that it's like, why did you do it this way?
Yeah.
With the last time, where they went in and made some decisions that you say, that may not, we talked about this on the show, that it may not have been wise, that they could have done it in different ways. And yet they didn't. And here, the same thing. I mean, politicians went there. I mean, people went, and based on the way that they were treated during the standoff, that kind of played into whether or not, is this a conspiracy? If so, I mean, why did you do it this way?
Yeah. But at the other hand, you have to look at this is maybe going back a little bit, but if you look at the case with Cliven Bundy and the Bundys in the first case, he was supposed to be in court to deal with the fact that he wasn't paying fines for his cattle being on government property, and he didn't show up to court. And they had a warrant out for his arrest.
Wasn't there people dressed up like cowboys, though, grabbing their stuff?
I'm not
Wasn't
sure
that
about
one
that.
of them?
I don't know.
One of the problems? I don't know. I got to brush up on this.
Yeah.
One of the quotes here, "We were not asked to judge on bullets or hurt feelings. rather to decide if an agreement was made with an illegal object in mind. Okay, so was there an agreement made? Is there an illegal object in mind? It seemed this basic high standard of proof was lost upon the prosecution throughout.
How can you not prove how about illegal intent of occupying property that's not yours and being armed? What does that fall under?
Well, they put right here, inference, while possibly compelling, proved to be insulting or inadequate to 12 diversely situated people as a means to convict. The air of triumphalism that the prosecution brought was not lost on any of us, nor was it warranted given their proof.
Well,
so, they were saying that the proof that was presented to them, they were like, why are you so, this proof doesn't prove conspiracy. It proves maybe a whole bunch of other things that we could judge on.
But, I mean, isn't this a case, isn't this seriously like O.J. Simpson? I mean, dude, that's a joke. It's absolutely a conspiracy for people from all across the United States to join at one place that's a government-owned building and arm it and occupy it, where people work, and don't allow the people that work to come back for 44 days and stay there and make a camp and make plans about what they're going to say about the government while they're there. That's absolutely violating crime. That's being a criminal. That's violating social norms.
Why do you think all 12? And he said that it was a diverse group of people. It wasn't like it was just, a bunch of Bundys in the crowd.
Mm-hmm.
What's the reason then why so many would say we don't see that?
Well, I'm not sure. I mean, that's why it blows my mind, because I think that's a joke. I mean, quite honestly, it is. I mean, especially if it's 12 diverse people, that's more proof of a conspiracy from all different backgrounds that buy into one ideal about occupying one bird sanctuary in Oregon. Together.
Well, they were right. No, I'm saying that the jury was a diverse group of people. That's what the guy was saying.
Well,
that these are diversely situated people. It's not.
I think there was character things involved in it as well, where you have apparently the jurors had an opinion about how arrogant the prosecutors were, and that somehow affected the outcome, which I think is unprofessional at best.
Interesting.
Well, I didn't like the way he presented the evidence, even though I think there's plenty of evidence of. And so that affected my decision.
Well, but in fairness, he says at the end, it wasn't that it was because of that. It said that wasn't lost on them, nor was it warranted given their burden of proof. So they're saying that the burden of proof that they had, they did not find compelling, which made the arrogance of it worse.
But this is the thing, is by this argument, you and I, as long as we're not terribly organized, can get 10 other folks and get guns and maybe head into the GR Museum, Grand Rapids, I'm serious,
right,
and occupy it for 44 days and not allow the people to come back. And make Facebook posts about needing supplies from people, that we plan to stay there for a while. Maybe cut down a door because they cut down a fence in the area. Cut a door down that we don't like inside the museum.
Wasn't there fundraising efforts?
Fundraising efforts. Right. And we stay there. And then we start going around Grand Rapids in our trucks telling people about what we're doing when we occupy the Grand Rapids Museum. How is that not indicative of some sort of conspiracy, I guess, is my question, if that was the case. Now, don't get me wrong. I would never condone doing that. That's crazy talk, and I think what they did is crazy. But, I mean, how can you justify that being done and say not letting people return to work and occupying the area isn't a crime enough?
And the idea that prosecutors did not present witnesses who showed that the group intended to impede federal workers? I mean,
how did they not?
They had guns at their work by the door saying, and maybe I'm missing something. I thought that a couple of them said, listen, if it comes down to it, I'm willing to die over this. Yeah. Says the man with the gun.
Says the guy with the gun. Says the guy that died over it.
Yeah, says the guy who died over it, right? And say, nor did prosecutors present evidence that showed a conspiracy between Bundy and another occupation leader who pleaded guilty.
Yeah.
That's confusing to me. As you say, hey, you have another leader who pleads guilty, says, hey, yep, I did it. And then you go, the other guy in that equation that would be required of the conspiracy for you to plead guilty to it in the first place is like, no proof of that.
And here's the thing is maybe, and I wasn't in the courtrooms, and this is, so I'm going to plead a little bit of ignorance on it. Maybe in the case of impeding federal officers, no. But trespassing, or there's the occupying of the buildings while being armed. I mean, that's got to have some sort of criminality to it. It's almost like saying if someone went into a 7-Eleven armed and kicked the store worker out of there, but didn't take anything and just stayed in the 7-Eleven, that's actually not. I mean, we don't really know how to deal with someone that did that. Yes, we do. Yeah, we do. You take them to prison. You convict them. You know, I mean, it's pretty easy. You know,
going back to what you said, Juror 4 said that he took note when Bundy talked about asking to meet in person with the FBI and being denied. Okay, so there's that whole how do you deal with people in real time, and then how does that affect outcomes in court? On top of that, visits from politicians to the occupation site, coupled with a lack of engagement from law enforcement, quote, caused me to see how occupiers could view their presence as something other than illegal. I kind of get it, but that is also like you can have somebody doing something illegal and people still do those things.
Well, doesn't it still make it illegal? You know what I mean? Yeah. Even though it's like, so if we rationalize this, we can see why these people didn't think what they were doing was illegal. Okay, but what they were doing was still illegal. You know what I mean? We can't avoid the fact that it was against the law to do what they did. It's a shame that they didn't get convicted, in my opinion. But you guys can think of that yourself. 616-656-1680. Stick around, folks. We'll be right back.
Love Paleo Radio? Join the club. Support our work by visiting patreon.com/Paleo Radio today.
Back to Eagle and Dragon.
Thank you for that mega dope introduction there, Angela. I love you like crazy. We already miss you. Hope you're having fun at the wedding. Okay. Evan Wirtz over at Adamist Evan. He said this on Twitter. Just keeps getting better and better. Time to make each show 2 hours long! Exclamation point.
Couldn't agree with you more, Evan. Thank you for the comment.
Yeah, it's in the works, my friend. And speaking of in the works, we gotta say this, man. Spreaker.
Yeah.
Or not Spreaker, I'm so sorry. Patreon.
That's what we need to look at.
Patreon. You have to go and check it out because we did some sneaky business. And we're going to keep doing it. And what we're doing is we're uploading our podcast there so that we've aligned them so that you can listen to all the podcasts by going to our Patreon page. We're also going to have updates about things that Joe's doing that we mentioned on the show to do with his comedy and just letting people know where to go for that. Speaking engagements that we're doing, any kind of announcements or updates can be found there. And we've been doing the work. We've been doing some footwork, Joe.
Yeah, we have.
Here in the state of Michigan, we're doing some work to get an LLC cranking.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we want to get that Patreon really working. And here's the focus, is we really want to have free media no matter what. You can go to our Patreon site at patreon.com/PaleoRadio. And when you look it up, you will always be able to get our content for free. There's no doubt. We are not saying that you have to have a paywall. We won't have a paywall for our main content. But what we do ask is that if you love the show and you love what we do, that you do contribute per episode, even if it's 50 cents, 75 cents an episode, or like you always like to say, $1 like a cup of coffee.
Like
or
a cup
Sunday
of coffee.
Paper.
You know, it's cheaper than your Sunday paper. And, you know, this next segment that we're going to talk about, actually the rest of the show, in fact, the whole show, every show we've ever done, demonstrates why Paleo Radio is so integral, so important to fair criticism and praise. Yes. There are not many shows out there that try to do what we do. And I encourage people, go back and look. Go back and check out our show and find out, have we been fair? Have we been honest brokers in criticizing different candidates, in bringing up topics that are not talked about all the time, and trying to be level-headed about our approach to this? I think that it's definitely 100% worth a buck.
That's
per
right.
show. And here's the thing. You mentioned that there's no paywall, right? Well, for our main stuff.
Sure.
For our main stuff. But we are putting together right now incentive programs that say, listen, if you do donate a certain amount of money, there are going to be certain posts that only you will be able to see. And we're throwing around different ideas, extra show content every week.
Some of that may entail Skype visits with us, or
Yes.
at least us talking to you. Maybe you can send us an article that you want us to talk about. We would flirt with the idea of doing that on the show for you guys. And all this is just because we want to give back to the people that love the show, but we also want to do this professionally for the rest of our lives, and we don't want to do it through corporate media and corporate spin and being able to be owned by our sponsors, which is the situation that many people in radio find themselves in. And it's the reason why you get the same mundane sources and the same mundane answers to problems. And you can get a different way, but you have to go through a different avenue. So we ask that you do that.
And think of that, right? Think of Paleo Radio and patreon.com/Paleo Radio while you listen to the show today. And just really, I mean, just honestly, just reflect on it and say, what is Paleo Radio in all of this stuff, in all the stuff with the election, and all the stuff about journalism and media and what's going on and how people simply don't trust it anymore? This article right here at The Observer, it's Ken Silverstein. It's called "This Election Has Disgraced the Entire Profession of Journalism. Reporters queue up to submit stories for Clinton approval as Team Hillary delivers dossier on unfriendly writer."
That's right. And I want to give a shout out to my good friend Tyler Francie. He's an old college buddy. I was surfing through Facebook, and he posted this, and I was really intrigued and looked it up, and I thought it was a great article. So shout out to you, Tyler. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Tyler. Starts with this. "We still don't know the outcome of the 2016 election, in which our quote-unquote democratic process has produced two candidates widely despised by the American people." And that's a point to bring up
Without
real
a
quickly.
doubt.
That it's interesting how our democratic process has resulted in the two most hated people in politics right now.
Yeah.
That's really curious.
And isn't that an evolution of the times, right? Where eventually the buck stops somewhere in the whole, you vote the lesser of two evil, the lesser of two evil, the lesser of two evil, and you're just having or quartering every single ethical choice you're making until you get down to the bare bones of just junk.
You're still playing
garbage.
the game. You're still playing the game of one party's team and candidate is driving a bus over the cliff at 100, and the other team is doing it at 75.
Yeah.
And you say, so that's the logic every time. No matter what, you're going to make it to the edge of the cliff.
Gives you more
You're
time to
gonna-
think about what
no matter
life
what.
is like, I guess, in that sense.
I guess that's an argument for it. But it says, but we do know the race's biggest loser. Reporters and the profession of journalism. And I've been thinking this, and I'm saying, yes, it's true, which has been reduced to surrogacy, largely on behalf of Hillary Clinton. Several studies rank electoral integrity in the United States as the worst among Western democracies. And this year's campaign has made the United States an international embarrassment. The idea of the United States lecturing foreign countries about holding fair elections has long been dubious and is now grotesque.
Yeah, I totally agree with that.
Yes.
Especially with the integrity of journalism. And look, media and the right to free press is the only profession that's exclusively named in the Constitution. And I know this is the old school argument, but if you think about that, think about how even back then, the idea of having open access to people to be able to ask serious, legitimate questions was something that was highly valued and something that they thought, if not controlled or if left or if put into a position where it is entirely controlled, it can be dangerous. And look where we are now, where the access you have is indicative of you giving someone the answers to the questions you're going to ask them. Maybe they hand you the questions you're going to ask them in the first place. If you want to even go in the same room with these people to ask any sort of question, you have to deal with that. Now, if you want to ask tough questions, you can always talk to the White House correspondent.
Yeah.
You know, those are kind of fun.
Well, yeah. Look at them. You know, Lee Camp, I like some of his stuff.
Yeah.
You know, we were talking about that recently. I like some of Lee Camp.
Leonard Camp.
Leonard. But he did this video about CNN and Brian Stelter accidentally admitting that CNN is fake news. It's a fantastic video. I don't agree with every single claim that he made, but Stelter's a joke. And Stelter literally did pin himself down into a situation where you could answer every single thing by saying, kind of like CNN.
Yes.
Kind of like CNN over and
I think
over and over.
I think there's cases, and what Stelter was saying too is, if I don't remember all of his categories, but one was saying the entirely satirical news sites like The Onion, right, that people just share without knowing that it's actually a joke. That happens. Then you have the ones that are a good mix of truth and complete fabrication, where or maybe it's not even a good mix, it's a low fact, high fabrication. That's like an InfoWars possibly, where they have an order of rounds of bullets that Homeland Security buys, so that turns into the FEMA camps, that sort of thing. And then, but he really did expose CNN as they're one of those where they take a little bit of fact and they blow it out of proportion. He brought up the Malaysian Airlines. How long did they talk about that?
Forever.
And run on that with little knowledge. And they were guessing. I remember them talking about saying aliens on the show. Like, when you run a 24/7 news cycle, I don't blame you for having bull crap on it, but you should question why you even have a 24-hour news cycle.
Yeah, and then there was Home Slice Cuomo over there saying, well, it's illegal for you to view Wikileaks. That's the media is a little different. That's how you learn it, is through us. And I'm thinking, I think the Young Turks exposed that one with their bombshell video talking about Teneo and talking about Doug Band and the for-profit money bags that Bill Clinton's got stashed in his pockets. Are you happy to see me, or is that a huge bag of loot in your pocket, Bill? And so he goes and he reveals this. But what was the whole kicker was that the media, when talking about this email exchange, that's the most blatant and obvious. It's hysterical.
It's unbelievably blatant.
It's blatant. He's laying out exactly how pay-for-play and access work in our system. And what does the media do? The media goes out and they take this little snippet at the tail end where he's going, Chelsea's a real brat trying to get in here, and they focus on that part. All these places. Oh, look. Doug Band, some dude, called Chelsea a brat while ignoring the entire email. It's like Watergate, man.
Well, it's like what they said. Why did he call her a brat? Like, let's just go down this trail for funsies. We'll do it right now. Why did Doug Band call Chelsea Clinton a brat? Because she was looking into a certain amount of funds that were going into the Clinton Foundation and asking, why are we paying these lawyers or these companies this much money? What is going on here? And he was emailing the leader of the Clinton Foundation, if I'm not mistaken, correct? And he was saying, let me remind you why you do pay us. And he was laying out dollars and cents. This is how much money you're expected to get if you stay with this agreement here. This is how much money you've gotten and are expected to get if you stay with this agreement here. He said in the next 9 years, Bill Clinton is due to make $66 million with the deals that he can do by being a fake chair of consulting companies like Teneo.
And and also on top of that,
this is all written right out in those emails.
$400,000 for private jets.
Come on!
It says that they give money for housing, for all these other luxuries and gifts that go to him, and it lays out. And yet the media does that. And at the end, and listen, you should go and check out this piece. It's really good, and he talks about his own trouble in doing an investigative piece on the Clinton Foundation in Colombia. But he ends by saying, we desperately need a better media because in this election, Trump's voters were not understood and issues he espoused were treated as reckless, even in cases where many Americans, in fact most, probably agree with him.
Yeah.
And he says you need to hold all sides accountable to the same standard of criticism, no matter what your views may be. And I think that sums it up. And I think that is our show.
Yeah. Well, and I also think in another sense, too, that is the responsibility of the candidate that you have. If you have a firebrand candidate that says, I'm going to say wild things, when he brings up good points, you can't argue that people are having a hard time sifting through the ash of what he's saying for good notes. I mean, if he's an articulate person, you'll get an articulate argument. If he's not, you get a bad argument. Stick around, folks. We're going to keep continuing the conversation on WikiLeaks, all sorts of different things, the elections, Hillary Clinton, Donald Trump. Stay tuned.
Now back to Joe and Jeremiah.
America's choking on the drip from WikiLeaks. It's true. The elite hate WikiLeaks with a passion, and there's good questions that arise. valid questions that arise. We touched on some of these last week, and we were actually kind of bummed because we didn't get to talk about moral ramifications and kind of the moral way of looking at it, where, take, for example, a quote from Marco Rubio. But there's so much to this article here. He's a board member at the Indicter. It's Dr. Nozomi Hayas. I'm hoping I'm pronouncing it correctly. If not, you can always email us at PaleoRadioshow@gmail.com. Listen, if you have praise or criticism or questions about WikiLeaks, and this is a shout out to WikiLeaks task force. They've liked a number of things, and a lot of the people following Twitter have liked a lot of these things. We encourage you to give us a call if you're for or against, doesn't matter, and the role that it should play, their kind of work that it should play in the future of journalism. And you can call us at 616-656-1680. But this article, Joe, controversy over WikiLeaks Podesta emails opens a debate for future journalism.
Absolutely. I think it does. And before we dive into this, I think it's noteworthy. We were talking about this right before we went into break, or right after we were in our break. When people are talking about WikiLeaks, obviously they know that we are hitting it pretty hard. We're really talking about WikiLeaks a lot. But you really can't blame people for seeing a humongous gap in coverage on something and feeling compelled to want to give people some information about it. Now, it's information that you can access yourself, but a lot of people like it through different mediums. We happen to be one, and we can be a conduit to that information. So when we give this information out, are we doing it because we like Donald Trump? We want him to win? No. But should you be informed about what you're voting for when you voted in Hillary Clinton? Absolutely yes. And the responsibilities you have when you do vote for Hillary Clinton. So it's just noteworthy. There's a reason why we're doing this, and it matters.
And it matters. In its 10th year of existence, and it's 10 entirely here, WikiLeaks has been at the center of controversy ever since its global debut with the 2010 Apache helicopter gun sight video depicting the killing of civilians in Baghdad. The whistleblowing site has consistently exposed the naked power of empire for the world to see. As a result, the organization has been subject to relentless retaliation, with banking blockades, I remember that, a secret grand jury, and constant character assassination, including the pedo plot, by the way, of its founder Julian Assange, who remains arbitrarily detained in the Ecuadorian embassy. The U.S. government's effort to divert public attention from evidence of its own crimes have quickly escalated into a war on the First Amendment.
Yeah, and I think they absolutely have. We have a caller in here, too. We want to bring him in. His name is John. Hey, how you doing, John?
Hey, good. Hey, Jeremiah, nice to hear your voice back on the radio where it belongs.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it, man.
Yeah, I followed you in the old days, the paleo days.
Yeah.
At any rate, I'm a huge fan of WikiLeaks when I like what they say, and I hate it when they like what I don't want to hear, which doesn't make me objective. But I'm starting to think that it's vulnerable to abuse, and email. There's a certain amount of privacy that we need to be able to rely on. We live in real politics in a real world, and if everything you talk about is compromised, potentially compromised, that's a scary world, in my opinion. So I'm kind of thinking that I love hearing dirt on things that I don't agree with, but I'm thinking that this might be abusive, and I'm kind of getting a little bit tired of it.
Well, I think a good definition of it would be that it's a double-edged sword, right? I mean, it can get you on both sides, but that I think is really required in what we're talking about here. And it's a good thing you bring this up, because it's exactly what the article is getting into: is what is the value of WikiLeaks and how does it play a role in journalism? Because it can really knock things around for what we write about, what we talk about, the evidence we have for things. But it does show the real ugly side and the dirty side that's under the rock when you pick it up. And man, it's some of that is good news, some of that is really bad news.
It reminded me of what Marco Rubio said, and I want to quote him here. He said, "I want to warn my fellow Republicans who may want to capitalize politically on these leaks. Today it's the Democrats, tomorrow it could be us." And I thought, at first glance, there's a point to that, but then I know it's silly, but there's a Twitter handle, Hillary PR Team. It's a joke. It's not real. It's a parody account. But I thought that what they said was wise in the way that parody can be, where it said, "Wise words from a friend across the aisle. Corrupt, compromised politicians of all stripes need to stand united against transparency." And I thought about that, and I said, here's the issue for me, is I agree. I wouldn't want WikiLeaks jumping in on my email, right? And we're kind of in this blurry place on public figure, private figure. Joe and I are. We really are. We're in this blurry kind of place where you can say, well, yeah, if they're saying something that I don't like, maybe I can hack into them. But I also sit there and say it is something. It has to say something that if they go in and they hack, and what we find out isn't just like personality flaws, but is just absolutely some of the most grotesque abuses of power in unethical dealings, cover up, right? The idea of saying we need to dump these emails, is Gowdy going to get all of them? No way. We're not going to give them all, even if it was subpoenaed. The fact that we know now that a guy was commissioned after the subpoena to go and wipe this stuff clean. So many things that you find and you say it's hard to defend the rich and the heinous when I guess the strength of their argument starts to diminish when they say, hey, emails are really private. We wanted them to be private. And you say, of course you did, because what you're talking about privately is some of the worst stuff that I've ever seen in my adult life. I didn't live during Watergate, and Joe and I watched that video, where we watched a whole bunch of them, in fact, about the Nixon tapes and Nixon recordings. And as we were watching it, it was like if people familiar with what is written in these emails can say you can fill in the blanks down the board.
See how it works.
You can see how it works, and you can see this is the same game that's being played. So I'm with you, but
who's eligible though for email hacking? In other words, I mean, as soon as I try to become a drain commissioner, are my emails now is that okay? Open game on John.
I totally agree.
And that's the scary thing. And then and I don't know. And we make a big deal, about Patriot Act, and with Snowden's and I personally, I think he gets a Nobel Prize.
I do too.
Yeah, but on the same token, it's when I just don't understand when you should become vulnerable to emails, and when Snowden told everyone that we informed us all that they're looking at all the metadata, whatever that really means, most of us were fairly outraged, even though I don't have it in the hive. Well, that's not the point.
That's right.
It's so I don't know. I guess I don't know. Maybe a conservative thing flew over me a little while ago and changed a little of my DNA. But I'm a little bit leery of this now.
No, I'm right in the same camp with you are, John. And just as a quick response to it, I think the way we should think about it is we should look at WikiLeaks as something that you take issue by issue, time by time. Here's a reason why I think we should be looking into Hillary Clinton's emails or the Podesta emails, is because Hillary Clinton is the one who blurred the line between having a private server and having a public server, and she made that a gray area. So these emails are open game. Now, if she was abiding by the law entirely and she had a government server and she had a private server and there was actually no connection between the two and there was no blurred line, I would have way more truck with the idea that this is unruly. And I think we should look at WikiLeaks that way. I think they certainly are a double-edged sword. I think they certainly can be dangerous too. But we have to acknowledge the fact that dirty deals happen, and when they do, we have a responsibility morally to respond to them.
Thank you so much for calling. We definitely appreciate it, and thank you for the encouraging words, my friend.
Oh, you're very welcome, and I appreciate what you guys do, and keep it going.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, John.
Yep. Make sure to check us out at patreon.com/PaleoRadio and find out how you can get involved. Find out how you can get involved with what we're doing here. And this is a valid debate. Those are valid concerns.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
It all plays a role.
This is the quandary. This is the quandary with what to do with hacked stuff. On the one hand, people say, boy, I really like that we found out about the Pentagon Papers. I'm really glad we found out about the abuses that were going on in times of war. And it wasn't just the Apache video. It was other videos that started coming out around that time. I don't know if you remember, Joe, the video of the puppy being thrown.
Oh, I do.
I mean, yeah, and kids being beat up and kind of...
It's awful.
Yeah, it was a terrible, terrible thing. So on the one hand, it's good to find this stuff out. And you know what? I'm glad to find out in hindsight, and I don't want it to be an ends justifying the means, but I am grateful to find out that behind closed doors, when all of this pageantry, this theater going on, and that's what it was, this theater going on in the hearings with Hillary over her emails, it's a fraud. It was a fraud. And to have the State Department, to have the Justice Department privately emailing and giving leaks to them about information and when stuff's going to come out, and having the emails but knowing they're not giving them all that kind of stuff. I mean, that literally cuts to the heart of what American justice is. And if we can't trust that, then how do we do anything as a country?
I'm not sure. That's a very good question, and I don't know if we even know the answer to it yet. I also know that there's another factor that plays in, which is how people interpret information when they get it and what they do with it. For instance, this is going back into the article, but after the DNC email leaks that led to the resignation of top DNC officials, Wikileaks has intensified its activity. Since October 7th, they began publishing emails from the private account of Hillary Clinton's campaign chair, John Podesta. We obviously know that. The archive contained transcripts of Hillary Clinton's paid Goldman Sachs speeches that show her and Two Faces in total disconnect from the middle class. It also revealed her private remarks dismissing climate activists. As usual, the leaks have been condemned by the status quo and Clinton loyalists. Mm-hmm. So the point being is, when Bernie Sanders is running, which was something that was a serious movement that people saw some action in. Bernie's asking for transcripts. Everyone wants to see the transcripts. Now it's post Democratic elections, and we get them, and nobody's interested in reading them. That's a serious problem with the human condition right there, folks.
616-656-1680. We'll be right back right after these messages.
For debates, interviews, or speeches, contact PaleoRadio Show at gmail.com.
You love to hate 'em, you hate to love 'em. You just can't get enough of 'em, you sick freaks. Paleo Radio's on the air.
Thank you for joining us, folks. Paleo Radio, 95.3 FM, 1680 AM. Continuing the conversation about WikiLeaks with Jeremiah Bannister and myself.
Yeah, and if people want to follow it, I know that some of my stuff is a little bit edgy. I know some of my stuff's a little trolly, right? It's true. It's true.
It's a good admission.
It's a little bit of a persona, not entirely. I like being able to escape into a world where I can be a little bit like that. And so it's not always just Full House in my universe.
Yeah.
Right? Bob Saget.
Bob Saget.
Yeah, I feel like Bob Saget sometimes, and so I have to have that release. But you can follow me at Paleocrat, Paleocrat. And I've been following these WikiLeaks and looking at different emails and trying to put things together, and discovering a lot of things. And one thing that I've really liked about the whole experience so far is that WikiLeaks and MIT and other organizations have put together programs that teach people how to investigate for themselves. And it takes out the filter and says you can look up any words, any string of words, and we're going to do explainers on how to do this. And not only that, but they're putting together programs, then you can put them together. They're interactive, so that you can say, okay, I want to find out the Clinton Foundation's sphere of influence and find out who are the people that are communicating the most with them and making those big decisions. And it will provide a graph that shows you how power works in our country. And you can visually see how this stuff works. And you can go into the emails and look at that. And then you can go into video for CNN, MSNBC, NBC, doesn't matter. You can go to any of those and you can see, well, what day was that sent? What were they saying that day? They said this on this day. What did they say in front of a committee? And you can do that for yourself, and that you aren't relying on, and this is the best example in my opinion, you don't rely on people like Podesta, who are allowed for whatever weird reason to go every single day and say, I just don't have time to confirm these emails. We don't need him to.
We don't need him to.
He is an irrelevant factor in validating the source and whether or not it's been tampered with.
That's not how technology works, folks. There's a trail that's left, and people can look that up and see if it's legitimate or not, and if it meets all the criteria for being legit. We know how to do that.
Yeah,
you can do it yourself.
And you shouldn't really trust much of a guy that uses password as a password. But yeah. The whole situation, if it's an interesting debate. But Joe, you and I, we've had some of the deepest and fieriest, and I mean, it was real fiery conversations about this election and our calculus as to what goes on, because neither of us endorsed.
No. Well, and that's never been my thing. I know it's not really your thing either. No. And the other thing, too, is I don't think it really is something where it's up to you. If you have a moral reason for voting for who you're voting for, it's the correct vote. I can't argue against that. That's kind of how this whole being open to different ideas works. Like in this election, I think the saddest thing is more than ever we saw if you're voting for X, then I'm going to unfollow you, or I don't want to be your friend, or delete me, or I'll delete you, or look at this person, they support X or they support Y. And I know we have really cruddy candidates, but that means that we should have a little bit more grace for those people, actually, in a way, is that we are pinned in a corner with two very bad decisions. So when people make we have to choose upon that. Can you really deride them? And for how long?
You brought this up, and it made me think right away. And I like this person. I think it's Brazil Magic. I don't know if it's Brazil or Brazil. I don't know the pronunciation of it. But follow her on Twitter, right? She's an unbeliever. She's an activist. She's out there every day doing a lot of very liberal posts and things like that. And she's definitely 100% with Hillary. But she posted this tweet saying, we need to go out and vote, or, this election's so big, so on and so on. And I agreed with the sentiment. So I quote tweeted her, and I said, Democrats, Republicans, Greens, Libertarians, and Independents, and write-ins, people for writing in, go and vote. Make your voice heard. And I quote tweeted it, and I was unfollowed over that because and she agreed with my sentiment, but said that this election's too important for that. And I said, that is really, in my opinion, it's kind of a microcosm, macrocosm of the problem here that we're talking about, and saying, and why we're different, why PaleoRadio is important, and why it stands out from other groups, is that we sit there and say, listen, I don't care what party or position you're with. This is a democracy. The whole point is that you participate, and that it's an accurate reflection of who we really, honest to goodness, are.
Yes.
And so you should be able to go and do that. But that was the tweet that broke the camel's back.
Yeah.
And I thought that is a rather telling thing. And I said, I'm sorry, I don't, I love diversity, and I hate echoes. Mm-hmm. That's just me.
Well, and I think it's really important to look at that situation and know that when people say that the election, it's too important of an election this time to have that vote, or they call that a protest vote. No, it's not. It's a vote of your choice. It's your moral character vote. People vote in politics very close to what they find to be morally correct. Now, it's not always that way, and people have to understand compromise, and there's a lot of different factors to it. But when you look at it that way, nothing's gonna help the idea of how we're splitting up in different camps and the tribalization of the country is happening in the way that it is, and that people are recognizing in a major way. You don't have to be a communication major or understand socioeconomics and these sort of things to see what's going on in the country and know that people are kind of camping up, right? Mm-hmm. When you see that, you know that you can either play into that, or you can either try to pull people into the middle. Big part of pulling people into the middle is accepting the fact that in many cases you will vehemently disagree with the other person. Vehemently. There's things that Jeremiah and I, we've been accused of agreeing with each other on a lot of things. I think when people get into Patreon and hear some of our late night conversations, they're going to find that to be very untrue. But with things like immigration, there's a way to have a argument about immigration and building a wall and having a 3-year expansion process so people can immigrate to the United States legally. There's a way of doing that in a very calm, professional manner that gets actual ideas out on the table, and you can actually cut those ideas up and get somewhere. But you can't do that when the idea is there is no conversation to be had. When you make a stance like that, you automatically get these amount of labels that go onto you, and I'm done with it. Now, the right, this is my opinion here, but the right has done that to the left for a very, very long time. For the last 15 years, it's been the pansy right, or the hippies, the tree huggers. You agree with that, you're a socialist, you're a communist, commie Nazi Obama stuff, right? But now what you have is you have liberals joining rank. You have liberals playing this game now. They've decided they're going to do it. You're the racist, bigoted, homophobic, transphobic bastard, right? And that's the game we're playing today, and it's a dangerous one.
All right, we're going to go to line 1. We've got Craig from Grand Rapids listening on 95.3. We've got only a couple minutes, so we got about 60 seconds for you.
Okay, real quick. What does morality have to do with politics? Politics kind of goes beyond that and gets into the dirty world of making things happen. And morality, a good field for that is, actually getting out and doing something. I think this is a really important election, and it is a bit different. We appear to be, the middle class has been, there's been a war against us for a long time, and now it's moved into psyops. And, the things that we're having to endure is they've been stealing stuff from the nonviolent resistance movement, having temper tantrums over money in the Congress, and the Republicans doing nothing. And they're not out actively doing something positive for morality, which is they've inverted what the left has been doing in a struggle towards human dignity. I've got no problem with people who get out and actually work at it in their lives. I've got lots of friends who are going to be voting third party. But if you don't do anything and you just kind of throw that vote out without being in the mix, I think that's kind of a protest throwaway vote. You have to be involved, and your vote follows what you're doing with your being.
It's a quarterly report argument, and I can dig that. But it is a quarterly report argument. If we look at in the next 4 years, that we're no longer going to be involved in this, or it's only a 4-year look, and you say, if we vote now, we're going to lose this election, it's true. But if you vote the way you want, you vote your conscience, then the next 4 years is a better outlook of what the country's actually thinking, what they actually want, and then you get a better view and a better view. And if you look long-term or past that quarterly report mentality, it's the right thing to do. So it's to me, it's like people doing gumshoeing, right? And they have their magnifying glass out, and it's how close or how far away they want to look at the problem.
And, here's the thing, is that I understand the idea of getting involved. And I say, it's totally true. People should get involved maybe with the party of their choice. And that voting for somebody, I think Susan Sarandon said it best. She said, I think we've been voting the lesser of two evils for too long. The good news is everyone's so frustrated that at least we're awake. It's clear a third party is necessary and viable at this time.
That's right.
And that's a valid point of view. And so you sit there and you say, I agree, people should participate and get involved. On the other hand, we're learning what that means to be involved in the Democratic Party at this point. We are seeing now the kinds of systemic. It is systemic.
Yes.
And it's at the root collusion that goes on with the party, with candidates, and with the media. And Joe, there's the music, my friend.
There's the music. It ends so quickly. Thank you guys for listening. You can always follow us on Twitter at PaleoRadio Show or like us on Facebook at facebook.com/PaleoRadio.
And again, thank you, Craig, for that phone call. Wish we had more time. Make sure to go to patreon.com/PaleoRadio. That's got to be the hub of all things.
It will be where all your info is going to be, all your needs, wants, and wishes. Thank you guys again for listening. We are going to be here next week. We're going to have a whole nother set of topics, and we're going to be talking about, I'm sure, the elections. So it's going to be great.
Paleo Radio, exclusively with Secular Media Group.